everyone, this is the Q&A. If you have submitted more than one question, I am going to just pick one of those. We have so many people submitting, so please only one question at a time, and we do them all the way through the year, so just watch out when the next Q&A will be. Hi Rosie, I've bought some Ficus Rosana and Italica. How ideally should I look after them? I've enjoyed the seed heads. Do I cut Rosana down to the ground? Thank you. Yes, with Rosana, with those huge big leaves and those lovely seed heads, once it has finished, you can cut it right the way back down. That is absolutely fine. Italica is slightly different because Italica is a sub-shrubby one. So therefore, once you've enjoyed all the top, just cut back and shape it up into the shrub that you would like it to be. It's a little bit more upright, go down to some really nice growing points, and then it will be perfectly good for you. Hi Rosie, a tough question, but is there anything that could be planted in front of a row of Leylandii? I've seen in other gardens some people have managed to get Nandina to grow near them, but are there any perennials and other shrubs I could use to create a mixed border in front of the Leylandii? If so, what sort of distance would you plant them away from them? Okay, so Leylandii just put up a mass of root. They make the ground completely dry. So it is a very inhospitable area for plants to grow. But there are things that will grow there. I am going to be telling you to use what may be in some places thought of invasive, but basically I would like to call them thuggy garden plants, because those are the things which will be able to deal with those conditions. So what you should be looking for are things like Euphorbia cyparissius as a ground cover, really good for that. Then Berberis darwinii is also a good shrub. It's an evergreen, it has lovely flowers, it grows fast. It will give you berries, which is good for the wildlife. Then Geranium oxonianum thirstianum. So those are three good plants that I would suggest that you actually put in. Now, just remember, look at what are invasive and plants that you are not allowed to grow in your country. I am talking about plants that we can grow here in the UK. I am well aware that one or two of these varieties are on the banned list, especially something like Berberis darwinii in New Zealand. So just be aware that you must look at those. I can't give you that information. I have rose cuttings that have rooted but are struggling. Is there anything I can do to help them along? I would suggest that you give them a bit of feed. If you've potted them into a container, then maybe you could add a little bit of liquid feed with them. Use rose fertilizer or a maxi crop. Maxi crop is a seaweed based fertilizer. It is very, very good because it's a general fertilizer. It's not too strong, and that will help young plants. Hi Rosie, I recently planted a new border to create a naturalistic design inspired by Pate Oldolf. I planted mostly 2-litre perennials, Monarda, Helenium, Veronicastrum, Hylotelephium, Echinacea, Phlomis, and 2 types of grass. About 18 inches apart, 45 centimetres. How many years before I will need to thin out the planting or divide and replant? So most of the plants that you have chosen there will grow very well and create large clumps quite quickly. So what I would say to you that probably after about 2 years, you will be needing to look at the individual clumps and seeing which ones have actually grown the most, and then start dividing them as they become mature. Once they have got to a point, so you've done them at 45 centimetres, once they've got to a point where they are touching and covering, that is when you want to be starting to think about actually splitting them and dividing them. Some of them will need dividing quickly, some will need dividing less quickly. So just keep an eye on it, but I would say after 2 years. Hello Rosie, could you suggest an effective method of getting rid of Ornithogalum umbellatum in my garden? This year it seems to have taken over the entire place. I hand pull it, trying to get the tiny bulbils, but some of them still stay in the ground and scatter in the process. Yes, this can take over a garden, I have to say. It's very sweet, but it can be troublesome. So whenever you see it flowering, take the flower off. That's a starting point. Then really it is a matter of being very systematic. Don't just do a spread, oh, I need to get everything out of everywhere. Take a section, get a section cleared out, then go to another section, get another section cleared out. It will take you a bit of time, but if you can stop it flowering and stop it producing those bulbils, then that is half of your, half of the job done. And then it is clear it out, clear it out. Whenever you see it coming back into a place, clear it out. It's all you can do, I'm afraid, unless you want to spray. Hi Rosie, I have a Cornus cousa Satomi in a pot. I've only had it 3 years. It's young and spangly, but growing away quite nicely. Could you recommend something I can work into the soil to encourage more bracts and give it a lift? Thank you. I would suggest you actually really need to repot it completely and perhaps go up into a bigger pot. But if it's in older soil, older compost, that it needs to be rejuvenated. So lift it out, mix in some good garden compost, use a good proprietary brand of compost if you haven't got your own, one that's probably got a little bit of John Innes mixed in. And then I would also liquid feed, and again I would liquid feed with something like Maxi Crop, the seaweed food. It is very, very good. And then you could also use a little bit of tomato feed, but that will help it. You can also get these tablets of Osmocote, which you can stick down the side of the pots, and that will slow release fertilizer as well. So all of those are worth looking at doing. I have clematis, not sure the plural, are still clematis, and every year the flowers are decimated, what I believe are earwigs. Do you have any tips to prevent this? Well, you can use things which are earwig traps, and it's very simple. You can put some upturned pots somewhere high up, clay pots usually on canes, and you just upturn them and they'll go in there and sleep in there. And then what you do, you're not killing them. What you're doing then is you're catching them, you take them away and put them somewhere else. Just keep an eye out for anything, and encourage more birds into your garden. The more birds you have, the more they will keep your earwig population down. And that's about the best I can suggest without you doing any spraying. Hi Rosie, I like to propagate by taking cuttings, and in the past I've not bothered with rooting hormone, powder, liquid gel, etc. and I've had reasonable results. I do, however, want to try some more difficult subjects, and the books and online sources all suggest using rooting hormone. My question is, can we still buy rooting hormone in the UK? The garden centres no longer seem to stock hormone-based products. Have they been withdrawn? Is there any reliable alternative? Right, I would always suggest that you use hormone gel. Now, you might still be able to get that on the internet. I have a feeling that the hormone products have been withdrawn because of release of those hormones, people washing them away down into water and them getting into the water courses, and that is the reason why. So there are a couple of things that you can do, and that is use natural liquid foods to put them into. So something like aloe vera gel can actually help and stimulate. But the best thing to do is actually just take a few more cuttings than you actually require. Make sure that the secateurs or the snips that you are using are very clean. You have cleaned out your pots, and then just use a little, take a few more cuttings, because that way you'll get the number that you want. I will look into the withdrawal, but as far as I can remember, it is because of leakage of hormone into the watercourses. Hi Rosie, love your videos and Q&As. How soon can I start hardening off sweet peas? Despite pinching out, they are getting quite tall. North-facing windowsill, but it's still very chilly at night in here, South Gloucestershire, as low as 3 degrees, and always the risk of late frosts. Also, how long should hardening off take, please? I'm always very impatient. Right, patience is the key here. And you say you're impatient. Okay, Start the hardening process off now. Get them outside. If you've got a cold frame, good. If you haven't got a cold frame, then get them outside and cover them with horticultural fleece if there is a risk of frost. Get that horticultural fleece off as quickly as possible in the morning and put it on as late as possible in the evening. The hardening off process is a 2 to 3 week process, but the sooner you get them out there and get them hardened off, the better. If I coppice my cotinus, will it give me larger leaves but no fluffy flowers as it blooms on last year's growth? Very true. So cotinus give you this one, they're called smoke bush. They give this wonderful smoky bush. You're wanting to get both effects. So it depends on how big and how mature your cotinus is, but you can get both by doing half of it down to ground level and leaving half up, so that you have flowering stems and then lower down you have larger leaf, and then you can alternate that. The following year you cut off down to the ground the ones that were flowered, and the ones that had the large leaf will then come up and be your flowering stems. This way you've always got some flowering and some with larger leaf. It's a matter of managing how you do the coppicing. I have Liulareia the rocket that are about 5 years old and have never produced spectacularly. I put them in 3 different parts shade, bog settings, and they're just weak. I would greatly appreciate your suggestions. Thank you, from US Zone 4A. Right, Liulareia the rocket is one of these plants whereby it needs to get mature and then you will get good flower spikes on it. It is also quite greedy, so if you've got it in a boggy space or you've got it in a part of the garden where you need to add top dressing to it, such as a mulch, etc., just make sure that you give it some food. It will benefit from having tomato feed, and that can be liquid fed onto it, just direction with a watering can to the specific plant, and that will really help it. If they are larger clumps and they still haven't been doing anything, then give them a shock by giving them a good split, put them into good ground, and then make sure that they stay moist. Hello Rosie, I've struggled in the past with growing Oriental poppies. What can I do to have better success? Got a better spot with better drainage, more sun, but I want to get it right. New poppy Orientalis Harlem is said to rebloom in the autumn. Okay, so with Oriental poppies, the majority of the old varieties did not rebloom. You had a one-off blooming. And the one thing you have to remember with Oriental poppies is the fact that you get 70% foliage, 30% flower, and then it is a big, blousy, beautiful flowers, but not for a very long season. Great in a border if it's a big border, because they do take up quite a bit of space. The foliage is lovely, but you get a lot of foliage to a small amount of flower. That's the only downside I really see in them. Now, if you've got a sunny site with a bit of better drainage, that's absolutely good, but they are quite hungry, but also do not overfeed them. Now, Harlem is a good new variety. I think with its reblooming, it doesn't do as long or as many flower heads, but you do at least get a second blooming with it. So all I can say to you is make sure you prepare the soil properly, you get a reasonable amount of garden compost in there, allow it to establish itself in the first year, and then do not mulch every year. Mulch it every other year. That way you keep it a little bit on the starved side. The more you do that, the more it will flower and the less leaf you will have. So that is something. And then the other thing to do is chop and drop. So when you cut down the foliage, just leave it there over the crown of the plant. Do not remove it. Let all of the goodness that's in those leaves go down onto the ground itself. And that way it's reabsorbing its own nutrients, and that is a good way of doing it. And this is a good way of keeping things going in the garden. It means you have less work, you're less barrowing it all to the compost bin. Just chop and drop. Hi Rosie, I'm growing hollyhocks here in southern Oregon. They seem to always get borderline thuggish, unattractive, develop what looks like rust on the leaves. and don't always get flowers. Plants themselves just don't look what I'm used to. I'm originally from Wales and I didn't have these problems. Okay, so you're in zone 9, should be fine for them. Sounds as though they are really just getting a lot of food, and maybe they're getting really lush and then overgrowing themselves. So try and put them onto slightly poorer ground. That's a starter. Give them a reasonable amount of sun. Any leaves that you see with the rust on, so it's very obvious with the rust, you've got the big leaves, they look as though they've got pitting on them, these sort of brown spots on the top of the leaf. And then when you turn the leaf over, it will have orange pustules underneath, and that is the rust. Now that gets spread by water. So if you have an irrigation system, for instance, then that will be spreading the rust. So try not to let these get watered by irrigation. You can't stop the rain, obviously, but try not to get them irrigated too much. As soon as you see rusty leaves, cut them off. Do not put them on the compost heap, because all you're doing is spreading the spores around. So bin it and bag it. Bag it and bin it. And that way you won't be spreading it around the garden. Starve them a little bit, but if they are looking, if they're starting to get over thuggish, cut a few leaves off. Just reduce the amount of leaf that they produce, and once you put them under that type of stress, you'll get more flower coming up, and hopefully you will get a little bit more success with them. That's all I can suggest, I'm afraid. Plantings for window boxes in the shade. Right, window boxes in the shade, you can still have colour, they're perfectly good. In the spring you can put hellebores in, you can put in epimediums. For the summer, then try begonias, all sorts of different begonias. They love the shade and you'll get plenty of colour. Hi Rosie, I'm a beginner gardener, so thank you for the videos. We've an unwanted hedge with deep roots that we just cannot remove from the ground. Do you have any advice, since we want to plant other things in that area soon? Would weed killer work or ruin the soil? We've cut it right back down to the earth. Will it continue to survive like that? Thank you. Okay, so you haven't told me what type of hedge it is, so I can't tell you whether it will re-sprout. There are a lot of hedges that even if you cut them down, yes, they will re-sprout. Really, the best solution is to actually get all of that stump and root out. I don't understand why that isn't possible. But basically, if you can't, then you need to grind, or you need to put saw marks into the top of the stems where it was and help it to rot down. You can then plant up to it, but don't use a weed killer, because it won't really do any good for that ground at all. Maybe a silly question, Rosie, but when you walk around nurturing and seeing your lovely plants, do you ever make note of those that are attracting beneficial insects, bees, hoverflies, butterflies? Maybe an extra selling point, perhaps? And the simple answer to that is yes, I am. The fact of walking around and looking at the plants, you are noticing, you are observing what is happening, not only to the growth of the plant, but what is visiting the plants. And it's quite interesting, because quite often it is those plants with the most insignificant flowers that actually get the most variation and different insects going to them. And that is wonderful to see. And perhaps, yes, as I'm getting older, I really should note it down, but I don't. I keep it in the back of my memory, which as I'm getting older is getting less usable. So perhaps I should be jotting it down. But what I do notice is that it is those plants. So some of the heucheras, which don't have really spectacular flowers on them. They're just a flower spike with what I call a naked flower. So there's just the anthers there and the stamens. They get masses of insects going to them. You get some of the really low growing plants which have got tiny little flowers, and again they get lots of insects going there. And it's also the ground covering ones. You get lots of beetles, and they're very good at pollinating. So yes, I do notice, and it is a thing to look at, and you should notice it in your own garden. So everybody should go out there and take notice, not just of what is there, but the fact that some of the most insignificant plants or insignificant to us are the most visited by the insects. The big blousy flowers are there for us. The insects like the smaller ones. Hi Rosie, please can you help me with ground cover plants in a sunny border? All the plants such as Gora, Onothera, Eragrostis, Echinacea are all much taller, 1 metre, 1 metre 50. So in the spring, smaller plants will have sun, but later on, May, June, you may not see them and they won't get much light. Well, that's true. Oh, and greetings from Slovakia. That is very true, but you can utilise the woodland plants for the spring because they want to have a bit of sunlight during the spring, such as the anemone nemorosas or the pulmonarias, and then they love it to get shady in the summer, so that is fine. But if you want a little bit more ground cover for full sun, then you can't go far wrong with a few of the ground cover hardy geraniums or teucriums. There are plenty of those varieties that will go in full sun and be happy to grow with your other plants just in front of them. I have green fennel in one flower bed, which last year and this year have self-seeded happily. The bronze fennel is another bed next door, but it never seems to self-seed. So what do I need to do? Do I need to harvest the seed? Well, yes, that is the best way of doing it. If your green fennel is happy and self-seeding, absolutely fine. You may need to actually thin it out a bit. But if the bronze fennel is not doing that, then absolutely collect the seed, set the seed, get it growing, get nice young plants, start planting those around. Once you have more, you may find that they are germinate, they will then self-seed slightly better. Once they've got friends, they may then be cross-pollinating and you get better self-seeding going on. Thank you very much for watching and please do subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch another video of mine, YouTube thinks this one is perfect for you.